All right, thanks, guys. Happy Friday. Just one game in progress at the moment, the early one. But we do have some lines for Saturday's MLB action. And before we get into that, I just want to give a quick shout-out, a big thank you to my headline sponsor for today's program. That's Jimmy and the boys at GhostPicksATS.com. And if you like making money on sports, there's no reason why you shouldn't check out one or more of their very affordable money-making packages. That's Jimmy and the boys at GhostPicksATS.com. That's GhostPicksATS.com. Without any further ado, let's go ahead and take a look at our Saturday slate of baseball games and personal leans. All starts are Eastern Standard Time. And leading off, we got Cards-Cubs, 105 Wrigley, first of a double dip, and a 15-cent move toward the Cubbies in the early going here. Chicago opened $1.05 up to $1.20. No posted total as of yet, and 76% are still leaning toward the Cubbies. Now, pitching-wise, we're looking at John Gant for the Cards, Tyler Chatwood for the Cubbies. And speaking of Chicago, really good at home this year, 28-13 as the official home favorite. They're also taking on a St. Louis squad who's lost 5 of 6 when Gant made the start. Now, total-wise, Chicago's 11-6 to the over when Chatwood makes the start. We're also looking at a record of 6-3 to the over in these teams' head-to-head matchups. But unfortunately, with no posted total right now, I can't make a play on the scoring. But all that said and done, I'm going to go ahead and take the Cubbies minus 120, winning this one outright for some money line cash. Next game, Mets-Yankees, 105 in the Bronx, and no surprises here as we're seeing a 10-cent move toward the Bombers in the early going here. The Yankees open 225 up to 235. Totals at 9 flat, and at the moment we got Steven Matz for the Mets, Sonny Gray for the Yankees. And speaking of the Bombers, real good in their games at Yankee Stadium, 31-11 in their games as the official home favorite. They're also taking on a Mets team who's winning just 28% in their second game without a day off. Now, total-wise, we're looking at 0-3 to the over in these teams' 3 head-to-head matchups. We're also looking at just 6-12 to the over for the Mets when Steven Matz makes the start. So all that said and done, I'm going to go ahead and lean toward the Yankees run line in the under, 9 flat. Next game, O's-Blue Jays, 107 Toronto, and a slight fade of the Blue Jays in the early going here. They open $1.90 down to $1.80. Total open 8.5 up to 9 flat. And pitching-wise, we're looking at Alex Cobb for the O's, Marcus Stroman for the Jays. And speaking of the Jays, real good in these types of spots, 80% in their games at the current money line odds. And they're also taking on a Baltimore team who's won just 3 of 17 when Alex Cobb makes the first pitch. Now, total-wise, 5 out of 7 head-to-head matchups between these teams stayed under the line. Meanwhile, on the Toronto side of things, Marcus Stroman starts when 8-4 to the under in his 12 starts on the year. So all that's said and done, I'm going to go ahead and take the Blue Jays run line in the under, 9 flat. All right, next game, Red Sox-Tigers, 6-10 Detroit, and a little 10-cent move toward the Red Sox in the early going here. Boston opened 165 up to 175. Totals at 9.5. 82% are still leaning Bo Sox. And at the moment, we got Brian Johnson for Boston, Mike Fiers for Detroit. And speaking of Detroit, they've really struggled in many categories when it comes to the trends, including their 2-11 record versus teams allowing less than 4 runs per contest. They're also taking on a Boston team who's a perfect 4-0 when Brian Johnson starts on the bump. Now, scoring-wise, all 3 of these teams' head-to-head matchups stayed under the line. Meanwhile, on the Detroit side of things, they're 9-4 to the under versus teams allowing less than 4 runs per contest. So with all those factors in mind, I'm going to lean Boston run line in the under, 9.5. Next game, Padres-Phillies, 7:05 South Philly, and a 10-cent move toward the Fightins in the early going here. Philly opened $1.70 up to $1.80. Totals 8.5, and 84% are still leaning Philly. And at the moment, we got Louis Perdomo for the Pods, Vinny Velasquez for the Fightins. And speaking of the Fightins, real good in these types of spots here. 9-2 in their games at the current market price. They're also taking on a San Diego squad who's lost 6 of 7 ball games where Louis Perdomo made the start. Now, total-wise, Phillies just 8-17 to the over when taking on losing ball clubs. Meanwhile, the Pods are just 7-17 to the over on the road when the line was 8 to 8.5. So with all those trends in mind, I'm going to go ahead and take the Phillies run line in the under 8.5. Next game, Braves-Nationals, 7:05 Nation's capital, and a slight nickel fade of the Nats in the early going here as Washington opened $1.40 down to $1.35. Totals 8.5. And pitching-wise, we're looking at Sean Newcomb for the Braves, Gio Gonzalez for the Nats. But despite opening this one up as the favorite, this Nationals team has won just 39% of their ball games played at the current money line price. They've also won just 4 of 10 head-to-head matchups with the Braves. Now, scoring-wise, lots of unders between these two teams. 9-1 to the under in these teams' head-to-head matchups. Meanwhile, on the Washington side of things, they went 13-6 to the under when Gio made the first pitch. So with all those trends in mind, I'm going to go ahead and take the underdog Braves catching the plus money and the under 8.5. Next game, Pirates-Reds, 7:10 Cincinnati. The Reds are $1.20, totals 9.5. 60% are leaning towards Cincy. Now, pitching-wise, we're looking at Kingham for the Buccos, DeSclafani for the Reds. But despite taking most of the early tickets, the Cincy team has struggled with Pittsburgh, winning just 4 of 10 head-to-head matchups with the Pirates. We're also looking at a Pittsburgh ball club who's 20-13 in their games, taking on losing ball clubs. Now, total-wise, Cincy's gone 7-1 to the over when Anthony DeSclafani makes the start. Cincy games also went 28-19 to the over at the Great American Small Park. So all those trends and stats in mind, I'm going to go ahead and lean toward the underdog Pirates catching the plus money and the over 9.5. Next game, Dodgers-Brewers, 7:10 Milwaukee. And no real surprises here as LA's taking early money despite being on the road. Los Angeles opened $1.75 up to $1.85. Total open 8.5 down to 8 flat. Now, pitching-wise, we're looking at Clayton Kershaw for the Dodgers and Chase Anderson for the Brewers. And much to my surprise, we're actually looking at a Brewers team who struggled in these types of spots all year long. And as a matter of fact, Milwaukee's winning just 25% of their ball games played at the current money line price. They're also taking on a Dodgers team who finished out the first half strong, winning 4 out of their last 5 ball games. Now, total-wise, just 5-14 to the over in these Chase Anderson starts. And the Brewers as a whole are just 9-16 to the over when taking on winning ball clubs. So all those stats and info in mind, I'm going to go ahead and take the Dodgers run line and the under 8 flat. Next game, Cards-Cubs, 7:15 Wrigley, second of a doubleheader, and a nickel fade of the Cubs in the early going here. Chicago opened $1.50 down to $1.45. No total posted as of yet. And at the moment, we are looking at Luke Weaver for St. Louis, Mike Montgomery for Chicago. And speaking of Chicago, really good at home this year, 28-13 as the official home favorite. They're also taking on a St. Louis squad who's lost 9 of 19 when Weaver made the start. And unfortunately, with no posted total right now, I can't make a play on the scoring. But all that in mind, all that said and done, I'm going to go ahead and take the Cubbies minus 145, winning this one outright for some money line cash. Next game, Astros Angels, 7:15 the Big A. And no surprises here as we've seen a nickel move toward the Astros in the early going here. Houston opened $1.55 up to $1.60. Total was 8 up to 8.5. And at the moment, 81% of the tickets are shaded toward Houston. Now, pitching-wise, we're looking at Verlander for the Astros, Tropiano for the Angels. And speaking of the Angels, they've really struggled in their games at the current market price, just 22% in their games at the current money line odds. They are taking on an Astros squad who's been absolute road warriors this year, 32-14 in their games away from home. Now scoring-wise, 5 out of 6 head-to-head matchups between these two teams stayed under the line. Meanwhile, on the Houston side of things, they've gone just 8 and 13 to the over in their Verlander starts. So with all those figures in mind, I'm going to go ahead and lean toward the Astros run line and the under 8.5. Next game, Twins, Royals, 7:15 Kansas City. And much to my surprise, we're seeing a 5-cent fade of Minnesota in the early going here. The Twins open 135 down to 130. Total open 9 flat, up to 9.5. And at the moment, we've got Lance Lynn for the Twins, Jake Junis for the Royals. And speaking of the Royals, they've really struggled in their games at the current market price. They're winning just 21% of their ball games at the current money line odds. KC's also been terrible at Kauffman Stadium, winning just 6 of 36 ball games as the official home underdog. Now scoring-wise, Minnesota's 11 and 7 to the over when Lance Lynn makes the start. We're also looking at 4 and 2 to the over in these teams' 6 head-to-head matchups. So with all those numbers in mind, I'm going to go ahead and take the Twins money line and the over 9.5. Next game, we got more. Indians Rangers, 8:05 Arlington, Texas. And no surprises here as we saw a 20-cent move toward the Indians in the early going here. Cleveland open 190 up to 210, totals at 10 flat. 80% or so leaning Cleveland. And at the moment, we got Carlos Carrasco for the Indians, Bartolo Colon for the Rangers. And speaking of the Rangers, they've been horrible in these types of spots here, winning just 3 of 19 ball games at the current money line price. And if you thought that was bad, the Rangers have won just 12 of 34 ball games as the official home underdog. Now scoring-wise, Texas is just 5 and 12 to the over when Colon makes the start. Meanwhile, on the other side of things, Cleveland's gone just 2 and 11 to the over in the second game without a day off. So with all that said and done, I'm going to go ahead and lean toward the Indians run line and the under 10 flat. All right, next game. Rockies, Diamondbacks, 8-10 Arizona. The D-backs are $1.30. Totals 8 flat. 65% are leaning Arizona. And at the moment, we got Kyle Freeland for Colorado, Zach Godley for Arizona. And speaking of Arizona, they've gone 12 and 7 in their games where Zach Godley made the start. They've also got themselves a Colorado team who's winning just 30% of their ball games, taking on teams allowing less than 4 runs per contest. Now, total-wise, 15 out of 19 Kyle Freeland starts stayed under the line. Colorado's also gone 9 and 20 to the over, taking on winning ball clubs. So all that said and done, I'm going to go ahead and lean toward the D-backs outright and the under 8 flat. All right, next game, Giants A's, 9:05 Oakland, and a 15-cent move towards the A's in the early action here. Oakland opened $1.05 up to $1.20. Totals 8 flat, and at the moment we are looking at Bumgarner for San Fran, Cahill for Oakland. But despite taking most of the early money, this Oakland squad struggles when Cahill takes the bump, winning just 4 of 9 ball games when Trevor makes the first pitch. Oakland's also struggled in their second game without a day off, winning just 6 of 13 in that category as well. Now, total-wise, we're looking at 6 and 2 to the under in Bumgarner's 8 starts this season. Meanwhile, on the other side, Oakland's just 7 and 17 to the over at home when the line was 8 or 8.5. So all those figures in mind, I'm going to go ahead and lean toward the underdog Giants and the under 8 flat. All right, let's go ahead and slide into our next and final game for the show. That is going to be White Sox Mariners, 10-10 Seattle. And no surprises here as Seattle's the $2.30 favorites. Totals 9 flat, 82% are leaning toward the Mariners. And at the moment, we got Dylan Covey for the White Sox, Felix Hernandez for the Mariners. And speaking of Seattle, they're virtually unbeatable at home, 20 and 6 as the official home favorite. They're also taking on a Chicago team who's lost 10 of 12 in their second game without a day off. Now, total-wise, Hernandez starts went 11 and 8 to the over so far in the year. Meanwhile, on the Chicago side of things, 2 out of their last 3 ball games got over the line as well. So with all that data in mind, I'm going to go ahead and take the Mariners run line and the over 9 flat. All right, folks, that is going to do it for me. But before I get out of here, I just have to remind you to check out my daily best play at patreon.com/BrockPage. And with a documented win percentage of 60% for the entire year of 2017, you're hurting yourself each and every day you're not subscribed. I also want to remind you to check out my headline sponsor. That's Jimmy and the boys at GhostPicksATS.com. Jimmy and his team of young, hungry expert consultants at Ghost Picks are the most passionate in the business. And if you thought I was good at handicapping games, these guys are amongst the best in the industry. And as always, thank you for watching today's program. I hope you enjoyed all this great free information. And please don't forget to check out my daily best play at patreon.com/BrockPage.